Hi, I'm Jouke. I'm the founder and host of the European Software as Medical Device Meetup group. We are a 100% free and 100% remote virtual meetup group. We meet once every 2 months and we talk about software medical devices and the unique challenges that they have compared to hardware medical devices. We are about 450 people strong right now, which is a big group. It's growing fast. I'm pretty proud of that because I started this group mid-2020 and it's growing really fast. This is a recording of our session that we had on March 15th, 2023 about usability engineering. We had 3 excellent speakers on the panelists and 1 presenter. The panelists discussed prepared questions by the audience, which we selected 6 and they answered those. That's a very interesting part. And then we have a presenter that showed how she did usability engineering in her company, and it's pretty unique, and it's a nice combination of software and hardware. With this video, you're missing out on some interesting parts. In the actual meetup groups, we have a breakout session where you can network with new people. Super interesting. You can just learn from your peers instead of from a consultant. And we also have an interactive Q&A. So any questions you might have to the presenters, you can just ask right away. You can find us on meetup.com. If you search for European SaMD, and I hope you see you next time in person. For now, you can enjoy this video. I hope it's useful to you, and please enjoy. There we go. The future of the world is e-health, and that's kind of interesting. I always say this every meetup, but I found a graph today that says the same thing, so I wanted to start with that. This is the waiting time for hospital treatments for the NHS. Of course, COVID had a weird effect somehow, but there's a big trend here, right? From 2010 to 2020, the waiting times increase, the pressure on hospital care is increasing, and I think digital innovation can play a big role in solving this and making the graph go stable a bit again. And you're all part of that, so you should be very proud. I think it's clear that there's more technology in the world than ever before. AI can do a lot of things better than people can, faster, quicker, and more accurate often. So we should use it to flatten this curve. And the aging population is going to be a big problem. So you guys are in a good space. This market is really interesting, and you're actually helping a lot of people. So be proud of that, but it's also very hard. And I started a couple of years ago when I started the certification process for Easy, where I work. And it was so hard that I thought, okay, this has to be better. We have to build a network of people that help each other figure this out, because it shouldn't be this difficult. Let's make it easy. So we are building a network of industry experts here that are willing to help each other. We do that here in this meetup every couple of months, but also on the Open Regulatory Slack group that Oliver is hosting. He's here as well today. And basically the goal is to build a network, but also to discuss best practices and problems and just help each other out. We cannot do this without you. So there's always a lot of people that are lurkers, that are just getting information. Then you have people that contribute sometimes, and a couple of people that contribute a lot of the time. We get a lot of feedback after every meetup, and I think it's from the top like 10%. So if you disagree with that feedback, and the feedback is always positive, please let us know, become active, and let us know that we're not doing a good job. But so far, people have been very happy with this group. So thank you for the positive reactions, and if you don't agree, let us know as well. One of the things we did last time is make it a bit longer. Tonight, I think we can use all that time because we have a pretty packed schedule. So we're going to sometimes go a bit fast. We won't have the time to pause at every single question for a long time, but that's okay. We'll figure things out, and we can always reach out to the presenters if we have more questions afterwards. Thank you for all your input so far. So a lot of people filled in the question in Meetup group, and we used that last couple of days to present like a short list of questions that we're going to tackle with the panel. So thank you so much for everyone that filled it in. It was funny. I think we'll see in a bit why. Today we're going to do a couple of things. This is the introduction. Then Oliver will give community and regulatory updates. We have a breakout session for you guys to network, to get to know each other a bit, small groups of 5 people. Then Barbara is going to present a showcase of about 20 minutes, including some Q&A. Then we have a short break, and then we go to the main panel questions. The panel questions will be 6 questions that we've prepared, and after that, we will use the Google Meet Q&A functionality to vote on the top questions, and we go top to bottom, basically. That's it. Oh no, that's not it. I have to introduce myself. So I'm Jouke, I'm CTO at Easy. I'm a software person. I've been in medical device for about 5 years, and I started this group because my certification project was very tough, and I thought we have to fix this. Since last year, Emma's been working with me to organize this. She's not feeling 100% today, so Emma, if you briefly want to introduce yourself.
Yes. So I am Emma Klein. I have roughly 3 years of regulatory experience, and currently I work at Madame Voy, and we are Swiss, UK, and European authorized representative and importer, and we are expanding, which is quite fun. And I organize these meetings because I think there is so much space to make regulatory easier and more accessible for everyone. So yes, there you go.
Thank you. We are sponsored by Easy, my company. So we're an online eye exam based in Amsterdam, Class 1M certified under MDD, and almost Class 2A. We submitted the 4th round of technical documentation Q&A yesterday. So hopefully MDR very soon. Then we have a presenter for a showcase today, Barbara Dzino. I think you left a couple of days ago as head of operations at Brain Hero. So you can introduce yourself in a bit. And now we have a panel of Dr. Michaela Kauer-Franz, Michaela Engler, Anja Röpling. I hope I say that correct. You guys are all German, so the names are a bit different. And Oliver will give the community and regulatory updates. Then now really, Barbara, off to you. I will stop sharing my screen. And please tell us about what you did at Brain Hero.
Please let me know if you can see my slides.
Yes.
All right, great. Yeah, so I'm Barbara. Jouke already introduced me. I'm the former head of operations from Brain Hero. We're a Viennese-based startup. And I'm telling you today about the usability learnings on our journey to getting CE certified for MDR. And we must have done something right because we are certified according to MDR Class 2A. Yeah, so I'm going to share some insights. Please feel free to give feedback. And is there already a question? Sylvie, do you already have a question? All right. Well, sorry?
Only the wrong button, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to give feedback throughout the talk or ask questions. I'm going to go through with first giving a bit of context of the product because otherwise you don't understand the learnings. Then I'll go through some best practices for usability that we use, generally, how do we document stuff, etc. I'm sure the experts will go into detail later on anyway in the panel as well. So there were some questions submitted on that. Jouke is nodding, yeah, definitely. And do let me know. Yeah, I will let you know about the learnings I had. I came up with 5, but I'll go through with you anyway. All right, so there's the context of the product. The Brain Hero product is an EEG coupled with an iPad. Please forgive me, I know it's not strictly software as a medical device, but it's also a hardware device. But basically with the EEG, you wear it on your head, as you can see in the picture on the bottom right. And you can connect it with the iPad via Bluetooth, and you do neurofeedback therapy with the device at home. So it's generally for parents with kids with autism and ADHD, age 6 to 18, for home use of neurofeedback therapy. So neurofeedback therapy is already used in clinics, and how the device works is the electrodes attached on the headband measure the brain activity in certain brain regions and send the signals to the EEG. The EEG then measures your brain activity, and it gets translated onto the iPad. And when you activate the brain regions, your hero flies up. You can imagine this a bit like Flappy Bird, and it flies down when you have less activity in the brain regions, and this alleviates the symptoms of ADHD and ASD kids. So a bit of a complex product because you have to explain a bit what you're doing, because it's not something a lot of people do at home. They usually do it at clinics, but the benefit here is that you do it at home because you're much more inclined to do it more often. You can imagine this like meditation, for example, as well. Like the more you meditate, the more it helps. So yeah, that's the product. So basically, to understand, we have the environment for the usage of the devices at home. Then it's ages 6 to 18 for kids with autism and ADHD, and it's a hardware and software device. All right. Why do we do usability engineering? Yeah, you're all experts. You know we have to comply with the 62366. More on this later, but the general gist of it is make sure your product is used as intended. Are there any risks? Is it safe to use? Is it working in the normal working environment as intended? I know this is very basically summarized, but also here, again, very basically summarized the context and how we're using this. We have hardware, software development, lifecycle in general. We first think about our requirements, then we add the risk management, think about all the risks attached to our product, and then we base our usability engineering off of that, because we do want to test the device before it is released. Yeah, it's pretty basic. How do we document usability in general? We create a usability file. We write a beautiful SOP first on how to do usability in general, based off the standard, and then we write a plan telling us how we do usability engineering. Important is to include acceptability and the methodology on how you're doing usability, the protocol and the script. I'll go into that because that was a major learning. We usually have a sheet that we read all the participants so they get the same information, and also break it down in little tasks based on our risks. And then we create a report off of that. Yeah, and we obviously do formative testing, usually with internal company people that are a bit further away from the product, so they can actually give some feedback that is new to us, and summative testing with external people that are as close as we can get to the intended user group. Right, so here are my top 5 learnings. First of all, concerns the test protocols. Second one is not including obvious risks. Third is about getting participants in general. The fourth is about the manual, and the fifth is about time management. Yeah. Test protocols. We started off with doing creating a template for each test person. We were like, yeah, okay, we'll totally write down the tasks and then copy paste it, and for each person we'll fill this out. Have they managed the task well? Have they not? But then again, you have to go through each one of them and you're like, oh wow, test person 1, test person 2, test person 3, and you have like this large list of people who conducted tests with you. And you actually want to compare the tasks and how they performed on each task that you gave them and the risks. So doing this manually was just like a pain. So we very quickly opted for a survey tool. I think most of people know it. We used Google Forms because that actually helped us group the tasks and already gave us a graph that we could use later in our usability report. Probably not the most elegant solution for this. If you have feedback on this later, it worked for us and it helped us quite a lot to actually manage the amount of tests we did. And we did a lot, so that helped a bit. Not including common risks, learning number 2. when you develop a device and when you're in the development stage, you think about your device a lot. And it does mention in the norm itself, in the 62366, that transportation and installation are a thing as well. And we did not forget about it, but we were like, yeah, totally, we're gonna, we have this beautiful packaging box, we're gonna stick a fragile button on there, and like the glass thingy that is, that says fragile, that's the ultimate sign for it. And yeah, installation, people know how to install an app. We just, know. It was quite fun to us when apparently we had to document how we transport the device as well. And we actually, it's a standard that you ship the box you have of the device, even if it's like super padded, etc., in plastic and all. You have to ship it around for a bit and then check again if everything works as intended. And because we didn't have a lot of devices at the start, because you don't go into production when you're still testing stuff, it was sufficient to actually carry it around in like the subway, or you carry it around to user tests, etc. And then you just document what the temperature was during the day and if it was raining, and etc. That was quite weird and fun to us, because it was like, okay, yeah, sure, that counts, but all right. And yeah, the device did work after we carried the box around for a bit. And also installation. We do have the app as well that goes with our device. And yeah, we actually had to create a guide on how to download apps. We didn't think of that initially so much. We were like, yeah, people know how to install apps, right? But apparently not. And that was part of a user test as well. But a fun learning, yeah. Third learning was reaching the user group. Anyone who of you have ever done usability engineering maybe, or user tests, it's really hard to find your intended user group if you're very specific. It's like finding people for clinical trials. I think that's about the difficulty sometimes. You have to check availability via email, scheduling via email, etc., or phone calls and reminder emails. And it got to quite a lot of admin work, actually just communicating with the user group and getting them to participate in our tests. So we shifted the workload from a support team a little bit to our IT team, and we created this beautiful database of participants that we wanted to test with us. So we always had them at our fingertips, and we could just send out a mass email for a certain period of time. And I also recommend, when you have a very specific user group, for example, for us, it was parents with children. You have to think of them as like the whole, like the user itself. They're parents with children. So testing in July, August is a no-no because they're all on vacation. So do think also on when to test, because it really depends on your user, and you might not get as many testers when you test to certain times, whether it's in a school, for example. Manual and tutorial, right? Might not be super important for a lot of people when they don't have a hardware device, but for hardware devices, it's still important to have a printed manual. And yeah, let's just face it, nobody actually reads the manual. So all the information we had in the manual, we actually put into a tutorial video inside the app, and then tested the manual as well separately, just in case, to make sure the content of the manual was sound. But yeah, people do not read manuals, as not even if you watch them, and during the user test, they skim it at best. Yeah. So tutorial videos actually really helped us. So as much as you can, as information, you can put it into the app, which is much easier when you do only software, I guess, because you don't even have a hardware. But yeah, something to think about. And the last one, time management, formative testing with internal people is great. But when you're very confident and you work in sprints and you think, hey, yeah, totally, I want to get this done, I want to ship it, I want to get it out there. Don't schedule summative testing close to formative testing, because there will be kinks, there will be stuff happening. You always need to figure stuff out. Just make sure there's a little bit of buffer between formative and summative testing, just because Yeah, it's hard finding summative testers in the first place, and you don't want to repeat those tests. And when you have kinks before, it might be, yeah, you don't want to test a buggy product. So do consider that it always takes a lot more time than you actually think it does. Yeah, just to summarize, make sure test protocols, you have a system that works for you, because you will generate a lot of data. Second, just look if there are if there are some risks you haven't thought about. Getting participants is hard. Nobody reads the manual, and don't move immediately from formative to summative testing.
So we are at the longest part of this evening, the panel session. I'm looking forward to this. We have 3 fantastic people, like I told you already. Dr. Michaela Kauer-Franz, Michaela Engler, Anja Röpling. And please take about 1 minute each to introduce yourself. We go from top to bottom, so please do that. And then after that, we go to the first questions. Oh, you're on mute.
Here? Okay, perfect. Then I'm going to start. Hi, my name is Michaela. I am the founder and CEO of Custom Medical. I have a background in psychology and am active in the field of usability engineering and user experience since almost 20 years now, since 14 years with a very strong focus on medical devices, and since 10 years with my own company. And in the free time that I do not have so much, I am married and have 3 little, no, not little anymore, 3 wonderful daughters.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael. I am a founder of Bankana Interfaces. We do usability engineering for medical devices, even though the company is rather new, 2018. I've been doing this since about 2009, and yeah, I've been looking in. I've a dedicated background in software engineering, studied computer science in media, so this is where I come from. I also understand 62304 if these numbers say something to you, and yeah, I'm member of the German committee for 366-1 and -2 obviously, and I also participate as a guest in the international community for writing the standard, and the -2 is currently under revision.
Awesome, thank you. Anja.
Okay, then hi also from my side. Also, thanks for having me here tonight. I also have a background in psychology. At the moment, I work as a freelance UX engineer and consultant. So basically, that means on the one hand, I really work in projects and I try to design intuitive and easy to use user interfaces. But on the other side, I also act as a consultant where I try to show people how they can also see the requirements coming from the standard as a chance rather than a burden. And my focus is always on sharing experiences on how you can distribute all the effort and all the costs that you need to put into usability in order to comply to the standard in the best way, so that you can get also out most of for your product in terms of product quality in the end.
Awesome. You all kept almost at 1 minute. Fantastic. Good job. So first question, and I'm going to post it to Anja. You can start off with answering this one. Do you have any funny examples of SaMD with really poor usability, and what were the consequences?
Okay. When I read through the questions that we are going to answer tonight, I was thinking how I would answer this question in case I get to. So unfortunately, my example is not funny, but I was working in a project where the software which was under development is basically like paint for medical devices. So you can paint some structures, like for example, tumors in CT or MRI images. And during the development, the focus was mainly on, can the users find all the features, can they use it, but not so much on how does the algorithm works. So in the end, that actually led to the behavior of the brush, which was in a way that all the interpolation, it was really tricky to really contour one line exactly, because there was a clever algorithm in the back. Well, it said it was smart, It's debatable if it really was that smart, which made it really tricky for some of the users from the radiotherapy area to really control very, very nicely the objects. And during the summative testing, 15 out of 15 users told us, yeah, your features are nice and everything that you can do with the object is really nice, but you would not use the brush because of all these inaccuracies. And up to now, talking about the consequences, nobody from the radiotherapy area is using that software device, even if all the planning steps behind are really useful tools. So what they do is they go to the competitor software and they control the objects there and load it into the software afterwards for the further planning steps. And why I chose this example is actually to show that exactly what I said in the beginning, if you distribute your efforts right, you can get really a lot out of your for your product quality. But if you don't, you just have a lot of effort there, and you should really be careful about the power that you also have when you find out something in the usability test. So maybe it's worth, when you do all the usability process anyway, not only to focus on the safety and the regulatory side, but also keep in mind what it does to the real usability of your product.
Awesome. So you would say that there was no safety or regulatory implications for that part, because it was still safe, but definitely business impact.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Michaela, do you have an example?
Yeah, all medical devices kill. So I don't have funny examples all the time, and that's why I went into this question thinking, hey, we're building medical devices. They are, and we need to limit the cemetery we are creating. So that's why we need to do this usability engineering, at least on the minimal side. On the other side, we might want to sell devices, and then that's interesting. I mean, that's the point. But having said that, our medical devices kills is obviously something that is an overstatement, and a lot of the devices that are out there in terms of software as a medical device don't need that much regulatory usability. But what they will need to succeed in the market is a lot of usability engineering or user experience work to actually get them in shape.
And do you have an example where there's some clear finding that had poor usability, and that you?
I have a killing finding. I know of a lawsuit in Germany, and I don't know the manufacturer, but in this case, but that was a breathing therapy device, so a respirator, and basically it has a one push button. And that button actually switches on and off the device. It switches on and off the ventilator. And what happened was that someone pushed the button to start the ventilation again, but instead of starting it, switched it off completely, and the patient died.
I think it's good that the funniest.
Sorry for not being funny.
No, it's okay. That's the funniest.
Not my job. I'm reading standards. Yeah, sorry.
I think the funniest
I
between
threw the whole
here,
party.
And that's for right reasons, because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of safety and regulatory things needed for medical devices. It's a serious job, and sometimes there are funny stories, but in a lot of cases it's really serious. Michaela, do you have any other examples? And then preferably a software example.
I really thought hard about the funny part too, and I think I found something which was funny to view, but not funny in itself. So we were approached by a manufacturer of medical software, which helps doctors to prescribe the right medication and shows them contraindication, prepare prescriptions, and all that stuff. So provides warnings. And the manufacturer has been on the market for a really long time. So it was a legacy device, but they hadn't done usability engineering, and they were approached for the transition period and were told you need to do usability engineering. So they decided to come to us and say, we're going to do the full cycle. We are very aware of all the consequences. We know our market. We are on the market for years and years. just do the summative evaluation. We don't need any inputs upfront. We just do it and we know it will work. And they were seated in our laboratories and viewed the testing. And if you viewed the doctors as well as the developers, that was basically the fun point, that not the results of the evaluation, but we had a lot of doctors screaming at the screen and throwing stuff. So they were really upset because they were not able to perform the task properly, and they really started screaming in the testing. So it was funny to watch, but the consequences were basically that they failed on the full level for the testing. But now it comes to the funny or sad part, depending on how you interpret it. So probably if you're a manufacturer, it's a good thing, because the usability awareness of the notified bodies is very low here. They were able to put together a rationale why it's still fine. So it doesn't have any consequences because they performed the summative evaluation. And they were able to, work through it.
If I that's a good example. I think Michael, if I heard your example from before, or your statement from before, their only regulatory requirement is unacceptable risks, then this is still fine, probably. If it's depending on the risk category of the device, of course.
Yeah, they often do check for formalities instead of for content. So what they do is they check, do they have all the parts that are required? And they have a checklist where they say, yes, I need this part, I need this part, I need this part. And oh yes, they conducted a summative evaluation and they do have a report. But they don't understand the contents and they don't check whether it was conducted properly. So you can still pass if you did a total failure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's sad, but sometimes also good if you're a manufacturer.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you for your answers. So let's go to the next one. I will go with Michaela as a first answer. So the question is basically from Emma, how to do usability engineering for startups that have very little budget. So what's the minimum that you have to do? Yeah. I think we gave a bit of a pointer already with the previous answer. And also the inverse. So if you have a lot of money but need to get it done really quickly, how to get this done?
Yeah, so seen from a regulatory side of things, you need to have the documentation in place. Just as simple as it is, which basically is going to check for the required contents. It's, I don't know, 10 points. Please don't nail me on the number. And you have to have a file which tells you, I have considered those 10 points, and you have some kind of documentation. And depending on the criticality of your device, this can be very short. So I've seen successful usability engineering files that just contain 1.5 pages. So really, if you have a low-risk device, or however you call it, a no-risk device, get the documentation ready. From a regulatory side of things, I'm a usability and UX professional, so investing in usability engineering and doing user testing and improve your device is always good for the device itself. But for the clearance, you just have to have the documentation. On the other side, if you have very little time but a lot of money, go for a service provider who's specialized in the field, because they normally have all the things that we talked about earlier ready available. They have the experts, they have the templates, they can do the documentation very fast. They normally do have access to a huge user base. They have an own recruitment team if you do have different requirements. So they can speed up your process very well. But for sure, you always trade time against money. So this is the expensive part. And in general, leaving the time space out, if you have the capacity to invest into usability engineering, the most important part is the only non-mandatory part in the process. It's the formative testing. So go for the formative testing, and this will save you a lot of money. It will bring you market share. It will improve everything that you do. And it will be actually the only thing that is relevant for your device. Everything else is just paper.
For the actual usability and the UX basically of your device. So yeah. Start very early with formative testing.
Yes.
Okay. Michael and Anja, do you have anything to comment on this? Oh, yeah, Emma, go ahead.
So the formative testing, you said start as early as possible. Would you also start as early as possible with involving the user in the formative testing, or would you formative test with other personnel?
No. If you have the capacity, always take the user, because everything else doesn't. Actually, you do it, but it doesn't bring you any real value. If your user group is somehow special because they have special needs or they have special knowledge, or in the case of Barbara that we discussed, where you have children, they have totally different capacities of handling this. And they always have a different experience and background. So they consider their normally daily life, their working environment, whatever you're talking about, into how they are going to use your device and how they are going to rate your device. So especially if you're interested in not only surpassing the regulatory clearance, but getting a device which will be good marketed, you need to talk to the users that are really targeted by your device early on.
Awesome. Anja?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one little thing to what Michaela said also, because I can also just emphasize how important the formative usability testing is. And also in combination with the question here from you, Emma, about how can startups with maybe a smaller budget deal with that. I think that for startups, the big advantage which they have is that they often have some close connections to some consultants, like to some users. So especially for the formative stuff, it's often pretty easy. Just call somebody. Maybe if you have software only, you can even do it remotely. So I would say, especially for the startups, it's sometimes even easier to perform those formative tests because you're just closer to at least some of your users. And a lot of people just like helping small companies, I think. That's
True.
also a bit, yeah.
Michael?
The best thing to get cheaply through usability is starting as early as you can. And that means before you even write down an intended use, before you even think about a device, start usability engineering. Get to know your users, get to know the use environment, and you'll be much cheaper off because you remove loops.
There's a lot of comments here. Michaela?
Just one additional addition for your question, Emma, about how to get the users and the right ones. So I know that this is probably a special problem of a lot of companies. So what you can do to reduce the amount of users that you need is you can try to set up such thing like a panel. For sure, the best version would be testing every new iteration with new users, but it is very cumbersome and it takes a lot of time to recruit them. So what we sometimes do if the user group is very special or hard to find is we have a fixed expert panel that accompanies all the user tests in a row. So some people who will be always involved and then can give you feedback on the advances that you did and say if it's a step in the right direction. And we also include at least 2 or 3 new users in each formative evaluation to get a new and unbiased sight on the results. But because you do not have any formal requirements on the number of users for formative evaluation, you can reduce the efforts on this part by still getting feedback from real users. And I think that's better than including someone who's not from the user group. So if you're struggling between I don't get any or I get a few, take the few.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to the next question because I'm the timekeeper here and I have to struggle. We're already struggling. So we had a fantastic statement here. It's a question, but also a statement. Does the IEC 63366 standard actually improve usability? I added actually. How can it be improved? Michael, can you comment on this?
So you're asking the wrong person on the second part because I've obviously been taking part in writing this thing.
Can you give us
So
a sneak preview?
I'm of course convinced that it's understandable. No, it's not, and it's a big problem. On the other hand, if you write standards, you need to agree. So this makes it very hard to actually make it understandable because you're intentionally silent about a lot of things to get consensus, and that's one of the things. Does it improve usability? I would say if you apply it in the way it should be applied, it can help to ensure that we see safe devices. But it might actually not bring us to the point that we have good usability because we only look at the safety parts if we fulfill the regulatory requirements. So we always have, and Michaela and Anja already said that as well, we have market usability and we have regulatory usability, and we need to separate these out in your heads. Yeah. So use both concepts and think about, does it help me on the regulatory side? Does it help me on the market side? And when you get this straight for you, is usability important for my device in terms of marketing? Then invest a lot of money. It pays off well. If you don't, if that's not the issue, and you only are looking on safety, and hey, it's a very special expert group. Yes, it's nice to do usability engineering. You shouldn't kill people with bad user interfaces, but hey, there are probably other things you should invest your money in. Having said, you obviously need the bits and pieces in place, but yeah, people can be taught a lot of things. I hate me saying that, but that might be a good business driver. Yeah. Okay.
Can you maybe
then,
give a bit of an example of something that is left out intentionally out of the standard?
oh yeah, the number of users that you need for testing is intentionally left out because the FDA says we want 15 and everyone else says we don't want as much. Yeah, so that's the only reason. Yeah, and if you try to argue against that, it's absolutely impossible. And especially in Europe, we have a lot of small manufacturers that don't do as much usability engineering and don't have as much resources. And we want to lower the barrier to market entry. In that respect, well, we didn't do well with MDR, but that's a different story. So in that respect, that's one clear example where that was left out. It was 15, Emma. Having said that, there are cases where you have to do far more.
Interesting. I like the answer. I saw a lot of nodding, so I think the other experts agree. And in the interest of time, we're going to continue to the next question. I do love the answer and insight. What are the most common mistakes we can make? I think we saw a couple already. Anja, can you take a stab at this?
Yeah. So I think we already talked about neglecting the formative usability tests, so I won't go into that argument anymore. Maybe also more from the regulatory perspective. What I've seen a lot of times is that the link between risk management and usability engineering is sometimes really weak or maybe even not existing. And one thing that I've seen a lot is that maybe you check how can the use errors lead to any hazardous situation, but what is often left out is the other way around. How can you make sure that if you have a technical problem in your software, that the user is really aware of that and knows how to react and knows about the consequences? So that's something which is just often missed to my experience. And then the rest of the mistakes that I would say they are also a lot of content driven. So how you set up your usability tests, also how you describe your use scenarios, because what's often done is just writing scenarios which are more driven from the GUI perspective, so that you end up testing every single feature, every single button in the GUI, instead of really focusing on the task the user wants to do with your device and the goal which they want to reach, and showing that they can do that safely by using your features. So it's just the other way around that I would do it. So I would say maybe that's at least
Interesting.
2 of my top problems that I see a lot.
That's very interesting. So, and how do you see this in practice, this link between risk management and usability engineering? So is it like traceability with numbers, or what do you, what would you like to see?
I mean, I would say easiest it is if you really have in your use scenarios a link to your risk management, depending how you do that, how you set the risk management up, that you have IDs or something so that you can really trace back how do you consider the use errors that you define for one use scenario, how are they represented in your risk analysis, also what you do, which kind of risk mitigating measures do you have. I would say that's the best way. You can of course also do it on a content level only, but then it's sometimes hard to really make sure that both risk management and usability file is always consistent to one another.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, Michaela, do you want to chip in?
My most favorite mistake is too late, too little.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaks for itself. Very short. Michaela?
If we have time, I would skip in 2, but probably from a different perspective, because Michaela and Anja already named the things that make usability engineering good. I would chime in from a regulatory perspective, because we are writing a lot of documents for our customers, so we get a lot of feedback, or other way, we are approached a lot of times by people who have been refused by the notified bodies or other regulatory authorities because the documentation wasn't right. So I would go into a bit inside what are the formal reasons that we receive complaints there, not about our documentations, but the original ones.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the most often things is formalities, as I already said. So people tend to use the old standard, like 62366 from 2007, and not the new one. But this is by now withdrawn, even if it was harmonized, and the new one is not. So notified bodies are annoyed by that one. This is especially interesting because it requests all the contents. So the wording doesn't add up. Because the notified bodies do not have a lot of knowledge on the topic, they often work with kind of checklists to see if the contents are there. So the next most frequently fold is that companies use internal wordings instead of the wordings prepared by the standard. So even if they do have the contents, the notified bodies are not able to, match both things, and are therefore rejecting the documentation. Which comes along with the problem that the manufacturers are not familiar enough with the field to defend their own documentation. So that's a two-sided problem on this point. We often see problems which are coming with the QMS system of the manufacturers, because they set up their system, they have a look at the usability engineering process, and they implement it as in the standard, which is basically fine. But what they do is they set the formative tests as part of the process, and then they do not perform formative studies because they say the standard says it's not mandatory. But within the audit, they check for the SOPs and say, hey, wait a moment. Within your process, you say you need to do formative studies. Why didn't you do some? So that's not a standard problem, but that's a compliance problem to the own processes. But that's Europe. So Europe has a lot of formalities. They are increasingly getting deeper into the topic and now are criticizing a lot of the methods that are applied for the studies. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. For the FDA, it's totally different. They are very aware of the topic. And the rejections that we get from there are almost every time based on, okay, you have conducted a usability study, but you applied the wrong method. You choose the wrong user group, you have the wrong setting, you have the wrong test dummy, you have the wrong cases, you didn't document your risk properly. So you need to be a lot better if you want to go to the US market, if usability or human factors engineering is required. So that's from the formal side.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the answer. You can also go right ahead for the next question, which is an interesting one, very on topic. So what is meant with defined user interface specification in the standard? Do they mean software requirements or specifications, or like what kind of thing would they like to see?
Yes, this is basically one of the weirdest parts of the standard. Sorry for that. Because it brings a lot of confusion with it. If you read the standard carefully, it says you have to document testable technical requirements. So if you just refer to the standard, you can just put testable technical requirements for the user interface into your technical specification of the device. So just write them down. And that's actually something that a lot of manufacturers do. And combining that with the argumentation that because they are testable, like I can measure the size of my button, that they can only do verification instead of a validation, so they don't need any usability engineering studies. As you can imagine, I find that a very interesting argumentation, and it did work some years ago. It's not working anymore.
That is an interesting thing. Yes. Okay, and it's about these kind of things, so sizes of buttons, color schemes, or is it about as a user you should be able to press a button?
It depends on the stage in which you're documenting. It's quite early in the process, and when you really start documenting there, you don't have any specific requirements that are on a very detailed level. So actually, we start writing the technical requirements later on. Okay, I haven't said that. Sorry for everybody who's doing it properly. And we're then writing down a mixture of things that can be tested technically, and some parts that are related to the requirements on what needs to be able with the product. So more based on the user needs. But that is not required by the standard. But I think Michael has a different understanding, or let's see.
Maybe.
Let's see.
What I tend to do is with this, I tend to only put wireframes in there. So, and never ever any kind of screenshots. That I see that happening quite some time, and I heard people talk about this today. So screenshots is not a good idea. What I do is wireframes because I think I have then a software requirements engineer or a software tester who actually looks at the wireframe, has a test case to actually ensure that the wireframe looks as it was in the specification, in the requirements. And this can be part of your software requirements according to 62304. And by the way, 62304 has a link in 522 which actually say, hey, you should have input from usability engineering here in the software requirements. So basically, think of user interface requirements, especially as we are talking about software as a medical device. Think about it as software requirements. Yeah? This is the level of software requirements we're talking about. You might have additional things here that are called in the way where you have guidelines and style guides and all these kind of things that define technically how a button will look like, etc. This could possibly be a reusable part if you have several products, but that is not. That might be something that you could put in there, and sometimes it's important that these things are defined too. So if I'm standing a certain distance away from a device, if I need to be able to read the text, obviously I need to define the text size because that is an important thing. Or my user group has difficulties reading. Yeah, so because obviously a good example is diabetics. They are not really good in seeing things anymore. So their nerve ends die, and any kind of sensory input is problematic, or visual input or auditory input. So this this goes into that direction. And there is actually a discussion right now on 62366-2 where we are trying to define user need. It's an interesting discussion because obviously when we want to provide a definition where in the context of that the FDA wants to see user needs and they have a regulation on that. And then we also have in the usability community a definition of user needs. And that is the things diverge. Let's say it carefully.
That makes sense.
I think the FDA wanted actually to say not user needs, but stakeholder needs, but that's a different story then.
Ah.
Not for tonight.
Interesting insight. And I like the way we interact with this. Anja, I'm going to park it if that's okay with you. I think we'll get back to the software requirements because that's also one of the top questions in our Q&A. So I think there's a bit of a chance to add more there. Let's go to question 6 for now. Well, it's again about this. So maybe you can start with this one. So how much detail do you define UX in the software requirement specification? We were already talking about it, but please, Anja, continue.
Okay, then maybe I can also start with what I wanted to add. It fits quite well. So what I learned, but what is also good in audit situations, when somebody asks you about the risk mitigating measures in the user interface, is that you make sure that depending how you define it, you have that somewhere in your specification so that you can show here that's a measure you can link it to risk management or stuff. So there would be one part that I would always include in the specifications. Also just for best practice, because sometimes it happens that you say, okay, we want to have it green, and then you do usability testing and check if the user understands what green means. And then during the next project, some developer has the idea that maybe yellow or pink would look nicer. And then suddenly you have one of your risk measures that you mentioned in the risk analysis not there anymore. So that's something that I would definitely specify. For the rest, to be honest, I think it's a really tricky question on which level of detail you go. I hear that question a lot. I don't have a good answer, to be honest. Like Michael said before, I would not include any screenshots because they are outdated so fast. And it's also a question on your versioning of the software. You don't want to rework all your specifications. Yeah, so I think it really depends also a little bit about the company, I would actually say. But please, Michaela, feel free to jump in here.
I would totally agree with you. Actually, I have never witnessed an audit discussion about that point. Just from the other side seen. What we normally do is in our testings, we include screenshots of the things that we tested. So it's easy to compare what was tested and what is the result. So we do a lot of documentation in the testing part. But for the documentation of the software requirements, we try to reduce the efforts to the parts that are critical. You know, usability engineering regulatory part is about safety. So I'm totally with Anja, and we always link it to the points that are associated with risk somehow. And we try to integrate all the stuff into the existing documentation. So if we write your documents, you will not find one single document that says user interface specification, but you will have a link which then links to the software specification. And there you will have a link which this is UI related. And the same accounts for all the user interface characteristics related to safety. It will be integrated in the risk management file and cross-linked there. So we try not to make it big, but to integrate it in all the things that you already do have.
Awesome. Anyone else? Anything to add here?
Yeah, I already said I'm when I redo files, which happens a lot lately because of MDR, yeah, so we're reworking usability engineering files that never happens to anyone I know, but of you. But hey, if you do that, I always go through, because the notified bodies don't have any clue. I say, okay, we're going through your existing specifications and we mark everything that is user interface related, and then we are done. Yeah, so that's the easiest way of doing it. That's the cheap way. You get through every audit. It's very difficult for a notified body to say, hey, that's the wrong way to do it. They obviously can't do it, so that's the cheap way. The ideal way that I found was putting wireframes in and actually defining all the paths through the software, not using screen maps or anything, which usability engineers or designers like to do, because they are always missing some bits and pieces. So I'm using state charts to connect the different bits and pieces. So that's a classical requirements engineering technique, but that is beyond our topic, so I'll stop now.